Yeah, I use a top-down approach where you call in high into the CEO's assistant, and then you get referred to the C level. And what does the CEO's assistant know? First of all, they know everything. And who do they deal with? The high level people, the VPs and the C level.
That's so
So from
powerful.
there, the whole secret to my success has been to find the who. Find the person who's actually responsible for making decisions about your solution.
You got to
You
be
know?
talking to the people that have the juice, I've found. So
Right.
I'm here with Ron LaVine, and we're talking about prospecting, cold calling. Sometimes these things get there's a misnomer that these things are like a dirty word and people are afraid of them. And we want to dive right into that today. Why are we innately, afraid sometimes of cold calling? What are some of those limiting beliefs that can prevent us from cold calling or cold calling effectively? And Ron, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your how you found success with prospecting and cold calling?
Sure. I'd be happy to, Carson. Uh, when I started doing cold calling, which was way back when, you pulled a phone book off the back of the shelf. You started at Z and worked your way to A because everybody had called the A's and given up. So that's the way I started. Now I use LinkedIn heavily to identify who my target is, but still I have a methodology of calling in high up into the CEO's assistant, getting what does the CEO's assistant know? They know everything, how the company runs, and they know who they deal with, the upper level people. So what I'm trying to do is to focus on finding the who, or the person who's responsible for making decisions about your solution, and find that person first. Instead of wasting a lot of time talking to the wrong people, focus on finding the right person. And then once you get them on the phone, ask for permission to speak, because if somebody's busy, they're not going to listen to what you have to say. So they're either going to say yes, in which case you can give your opening value statement. They're going to say no, in which case you get off the phone or you set up a time to call them back, or they say maybe, in which case you can give your opening value statement. So that's the style that I use, a top-down approach. If I get stuck, I use what's called polite yet respectful persistence. And if I get stuck, I go in through the side. And if I get stuck, I come up through the bottom, through the help desk or the computer room. Whatever it takes to get into a company and get to that decision maker is what I'm going to do. And usually I find that it doesn't take that many calls. If you start at the top and work your way down, it's very efficient. And I think that when people are cold calling, they're afraid of the outcome. And there's nothing really to fear. First of all, what's the worst somebody can do? They can't punch you through the phone. The worst they could do is hang up. you
Right.
know. So knowing that, and then when I do get rejection, I look at it as what could I have done better? What could I have said differently? What questions can I ask the next time that will get a better result? And so that's how I look at cold calling. I look at it as fun. I really enjoy it. And I think that's half the battle is your attitude determines your altitude. But even more importantly, you have to have the right mindset, a positive mindset when you pick up the phone.
That's exceptional, Ron, because what I'm hearing from you, and you're taking me way back because I'm remembering my initial days in sales. I was calling off an Excel spreadsheet, color coding it, and picking up a physical phone and dialing. And I've sold yellow pages, so that's where I started from a sales perspective, right? And then flash forward to today. The phone is still one of the most valuable tools when it comes to selling, but the landscape looks different. I don't know that there's as many people today that are just picking up the phone as like their first path to a customer today, whereas they would in the past. But you mentioned LinkedIn. Anybody that follows me knows that I have a very rabid passion for leveraging LinkedIn to create relationships. And so I love that you mentioned that because that's what we're trying to do at the end of the day is we're trying to create a relationship. And we
Exactly.
wanted to talk today about like the unpacking some of the fears. And I mean, I've witnessed it. I've witnessed people that have worked for me in years past that like they literally just couldn't even pick up the phone. And it was almost like a crippling fear. And I want to dive right into that. And don't get me wrong, like it doesn't start out as a comfortable muscle. This is not a
Not
comfortable
at all.
muscle at first because
Hmm.
it's like, oh my God, you think about all the things, what could happen? What am I going to say? And we tend to overthink it to the point that a lot of these dials, they don't even get a person on the phone. I mean, I've seen people prep for 45 minutes just
Goodness.
to not even leave a voicemail. And so I think the key element is first off, we got to flex this muscle and we got to be willing and able to make the outreach. But if there's no relationship, you're not risking anything. You're risking the lack of relationship by making the call. And the worst thing that happens is you get told no. There's a lot of no's. And I don't want to be too over cliched, but there are a lot of no's that happen in sales. But over
Sure.
time, and this is what you pointed out so eloquently, is that over time, you're going to learn from each of these experiences. What are some of the other fears, Ron, that you see that you've seen in your experience? Also, the people that you work with and coach and train. What are the biggest fears in cold calling and prospecting, and how do we overcome them?
Well, one of the bigger fears is calling high and talking to a VP or a C level. That's a tremendous fear for people. And what I've coached people to do is if you have a track, a script, some people call it, I call it a call track because you can move up and down, go in any direction. And if you have a track prepared and you know what you're going to say, it takes a lot of the fear out. And so I try and make sure I have a methodology to follow, a goal, and then some type of a call track, and then finish every call with a time and date specific action step. And that's really critical is to remember that at the end of the call, at the end of the day, we're trying to build a relationship and want to keep things going. So you need to ask when would be a good time to follow up with you, and if you're interested, great. And if you're not interested, still, when would be a good time to follow up with you? And that's my style. I also believe in doing pre-call planning or research, like you say, but not too much.
Right.
One of the secrets is to go to the career section and look and see who they're hiring, because who they're hiring will also tell you what their values are. It'll tell you, here's what we value in a person, and here's who we're hiring in the area of your specialty. So the career section or the job opportunity is a great place to go on a website. And if you get stuck, another place you can go is to the public relations or communications part. And usually they have a contact there. And you can call that contact and say, maybe you can help me. Who's responsible for making decisions about blank? Could you please transfer me? And you keep getting transferred throughout the organization until you get to the right person. Because there's no use spending time talking to the wrong people. I mean, they can help you to a certain extent. They can give you some background and some information, but they're not the person who's going to make the decision, or they can't refer you to the people that are going to evaluate, or the end user that's going to actually have to use the solution. So what I found is by going in high, you can get a lot more accomplished on every call than if you try and come in through the side or come up through the bottom. And so that's what I always recommend. And then keep in mind that whenever there's a change is constant, and change creates opportunity. And so you're looking for those changes in a customer's business or a prospect's business that will create opportunity for you to help them do business better. And that's really the goal, is to help, to be of service. It's not a salesy approach, it's a service approach. How can I be of service to you? How can I help you do business better? And I think cold calling is not the only approach. I think it has to be combined with social selling. And if a decision maker doesn't know they have a problem, or they're unaware of a new technology, then you have a good reason to get in touch with them.
Right.
So one of the things that I like to do is to keep in mind what's in it for me and my company. That's what people really care about. They really care about what's in it for me and my company. And so if you can keep that focus in mind, and focus, what I call other person focused. You want to focus on the other person. It's not about you. It's about being interested, not interesting. And so what you want to do is write out your value that you bring, along with the benefits and results of that value, and stay in information mode and stay out of sales mode. at least at the beginning of the call. You want to stay in information mode, stay out of sales mode, and you'll be amazed at what people will tell you. They'll tell you the who, what, where, when, why, and how. And then you close up your conversation with your closed-ended questions. So we'll meet next Friday, right? Or if I get this to you by Friday, you'll have it back to me by Monday, correct? Or okay. And so that's the type of style. It's not a complex style, but the difference between me and a lot of other trainers, I make live calls. I actually put people on the phone, and they actually get to do, see, and hear, or hear, see, and do what they're being taught. So to me, that's the most powerful way to learn, is to actually pick up the phone. We're going to call some prospects. We're going to do some research first. We're going to call some prospects, and we're going to follow this top-down strategy and see where it takes us. And we get some tremendous results. A lot of appointments being set. When I ask for an appointment, I don't ask for 20 or 30 minutes. I typically ask for 5 or 10 minutes, because if you can't get your point across by then, you probably can't get your point across.
That's true.
So why ask for a huge chunk of time that they're going to, my time's valuable. Why would I want to give up a bunch of my time, an hour or a half hour, when I don't even know if this person knows what's important to me?
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that I like to do.
So much great stuff to unpack there, Ron. So first off, calling C-level, I couldn't agree more. This is always an area where, people start to second guess themselves because they can't put themselves in the prospect's shoes. They don't necessarily completely understand their purview. But the amazing thing about today's day and age is that there's so much research that you can do. And I'm a big proponent of research. The scenario I was talking about earlier, it was somebody that was prepping 45 minutes to make one call into a company, period, and wasted time. But if you're going to really, what you're articulating here is almost what you've got to do in order to build momentum and build a groundswell of influence within an organization. So starting high, you've got to be armed with perspective. What's the value? How are you going to seek to serve at that level? And just like they are the master of their purview, you're the master of yours. So you've got to be able to figure out, okay, what are the strengths? What are the areas where I may be able to serve this person? And sometimes, frankly, when I'm reaching out to C-levels, I may be armed with value, but I'm more or less looking to understand, like, hey, are you having this similar experience that I'm seeing in the industry or with this title or whatever? And this is how I've helped people in the past. Maybe we can do something here. I'm open to being creative, but I think those things are so important. Something else you talked about, just being so resourceful. The method that you've described is very versatile and agile. Prospecting, selling is never going to look the way we think that it will, or that we think we hope it will. But the thing is, you've got to be open to where the journey takes you. And I love that you're being so resourceful to do some research and call different types of contacts, like even just looking at what types of roles they're hiring and making calls in that regard. Because frankly, in any great deal I've ever done, I just had to find my way in. And it wasn't always the obvious one. And it certainly wasn't inheriting relationships with lower level people who didn't have the juice or the ability or the budget to do anything or the decision making prowess. But you're talking about talking to people that are very much in the know, because guess what that does? That arms you with perspective that's going to be valuable in every conversation that you have. And guess what? As you arm yourself with more and more intel, and more relationships, and you can speak from a place of confidence and authority, guess what happens to your fear?
It's
It goes
way
way
down.
down. Now, you
Yeah.
talked about mindset, and I want to go there because you work with a lot of sellers, and I want you to talk about how important mindset is in sales and in cold calling. What are some strategies that salespeople can use to cultivate positive mindset and overcome some of these fears and negative thoughts?
Some of the strategies that I use when I'm cold calling is I picture a positive outcome. I picture the call's going to work, that it's going to be successful, and they're going to want to talk to me. And if I do this right, if I, get their permission and understand how they do business before trying to do business, not trying to sell them anything, just trying to get information and understand how they do business, then I think it becomes a lot easier to cold call. Yes, you're going to get a lot of no's, but that gets you closer to a yes. And so that's the focus I keep is what do I need to do to keep going and keep and getting to that yes. And I found this top-down approach works really well for doing that. And as for the mindset, you must keep a positive mindset. When you have a bad call, get up, take a break, walk around, sit back down, and think about what you did and what you could do better and what you could improve. And so that's the attitude I take. Uh, focus on the positive, think good thoughts. Yeah, action follows thoughts. So if thoughts positive, you're going to get positive action. And you may not get it on every call, but that just makes it more exciting to make the next call to see how well you can do. How many pieces of information can you get on every call? If I get one more piece than I have before, I've gotten a result. If I've gotten a result, I haven't been rejected. And typically you'll pick up a lot of information if you stay in information mode and stay out of sales mode and not try and present all your features, your benefits, and then close them, close them, close them. It's the opposite. You do the research first, you find the right person, you find out how they do business, you find out what's important to them, and then you ask for an appointment based on what's important to them. And that's really key is keeping your attitude positive.
I mean, look,
Because
we've got obviously the benefit of looking back over careers and sales, right? So
sure,
I think it's impossible to connect the dots going forward, but it's easy to connect the dots going back and look at, absolutely. Have I ever been in a scenario where I was afraid to pick up the phone, or I was second guessing myself, or I was fearful of outcome? Yes. However, the biggest takeaways that I have, and it's right in line with what you just said, Ron, is looking back over how I continue to fashion and evolve my approach based on what actually happened. I remember when I first started in selling at the company I'm at today and reaching out to customers, trust me, just because you have a big logo on your back doesn't mean people want to talk to you. So you
right.
still have to show up with value. And what was interesting to me is I started taking all of the things that customers were saying negative or why they were rejecting me or why they wouldn't talk to me or why they were passing me around. And
Mhm.
I infused it into my outreach. People were saying like, "Hey, a lot of times we've only heard from your predecessors when it's renewal time, or you want your money, or we don't have a relationship with your organization, or whatever it was." And so, even though you're like one of the biggest checks we write, right? So I took a lot of responsibility in that, and I started reaching out to people saying, "Hey, because of your significant investment, you're entitled to resources, and it's my job to make sure you're privy to that. Let's
I
talk
want to
about
be
that."
one of those resources too.
Exactly. And I could get meetings left and right because of that approach. And I think that's the
Right.
key is take that counterintuitive approach based on what you're hearing, based on what you're facing, and infuse that. And just like working a new muscle, over time, it becomes a readily available muscle. And you become,
Exactly.
again, the fear level continues to go down. And so I think having that positive mindset of I'm working towards something, I believe in the process, and I love that you've also, Ron, embraced things outside of, just picking up the phone because today we have so many ways of not
Of
only getting
course.
intelligence, but also reaching out to folks because I believe in having a diversified portfolio. I spent much of my time yesterday on my phone with customers, with prospects, but also I use a lot of LinkedIn and other social tools in order to learn, connect, reach out, and stay abreast of what's happening because, as you said, change is constant. We also have to be able to react and respond when there's mergers, acquisitions, new leadership, things of that nature, and knowing that I got to go for the phone or I got to go for the email or the LinkedIn whenever something like that happens so that I can foster a new relationship armed with the intelligence that I have, that can make all the difference.
Yeah.
Now, I'd love to hear some other thoughts from you as far as just are there other resources that you would recommend? Because I know you've been in training, training sellers for a long time. What other resources do you recommend to sellers? Are there, great books and podcasts, training programs, et cetera? And talk about yours. Obviously, I'd love to know more about what you recommend to sellers that are looking to master prospecting.
Well, I do write a newsletter, an e-zine called the Sales Intelligence Report email newsletter, or the Siren. And I talk to different experts and have experts write articles for me in addition to my own articles. So that's one thing that I recommend. Mainly, there is just so much information out there between Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and all the different Hootsuite and all the different social platforms that there's really no excuse not to pre-call plan a call. It doesn't make sense to call somebody and look like you're clueless. You have to know you have to know what's important to them and how they're measured and what their success is, and try and position yourself in such a way that especially if they're a new person in a new job, they're looking to shake things up, they're looking to prove themselves. So this is a good opportunity to go into an organization and work your way around and then come back up to the decision maker and say, look, here's what I found. I've talked to the people that you told me to talk to. This is what they've said. And based upon what they've said and based upon what your needs are or what they may be, this is what we think we can do for you. This is how we think we can serve you. And so I'm not as strong as you are on the social selling piece. I'm learning. I'm still working on that piece. But I just did I did a targeted email campaign. A friend of mine was out of work and we worked together back in Cognos days. And so what I did is I got his resume and I did a search on chief revenue officers and VPs of sales. And I put out like 400 emails and I got like a 90%, 90 responses,
Wow,
like almost 20%.
it's
It was
incredible.
ridiculous. Yeah. And at the end of the email, I'd say, I have this guy. He's looking to make a change. And oh, by the way, I'm phone prospecting again, training again. And so it served a dual purpose: one to remind them, one to give them an idea of this candidate, and secondly, to remind them that I'm still training again. And so that was one approach that I use. I love LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is one of the most powerful tools you can use, using search operators like and or, and combining terms. And then I look at my first connections, and those are the people that I want to approach. I can approach, and if you built out your relationships and your network, then you have those people you can go to, those first degree connections. So does that answer your question?
Totally does. And I think the other thing too, Ron, like looking at what is the mentality of what is success in prospecting. I think a lot of times when you talk to people about prospecting, they might put it on the back burner. They have more of a farmer approach.
Right.
Especially if they have accounts that they manage or they inherit accounts. They have relationships that they've inherited or that are easy to have, and so they have those one or two, three relationships. I look at the big deals that I've done. And the biggest one that I've ever done, I reached out to over 500 people in that organization. I had over 200 connections on LinkedIn in that organization. And despite 7 C-level changes in a couple of years, my team and I were so well entrenched in the business. We knew them so well. We knew what they were wanting to do. It was a big competitive threat in the beginning, but we were able to bring value to so many different pockets of this organization that even though this deal changed dramatically, the scope of it, the aim of it, the goal of it changed dramatically over the 2 years that it took to get the deal done. It didn't matter. We were so entrenched. We had relationships. We understood them. We found ways to invest and bring value, et cetera. So I think a lot of people, if they make 100 calls and they get, one or two good conversations, they're like, my gosh, I made 100 calls and I only got one conversation. Wrong way to look at it. The right way to look at it is, oh my gosh, I got a couple great conversations today. And how can
Exactly.
I build on that? Because
Exactly.
everything that we do, as you've already said, Ron, everything that we do, we just get better, more effective. We learn from
Learning
what's working, what's
experience.
not. And that's the key element. We have to look at it that way. And I think that's where a lot of people can and should embrace prospecting. It is believing and devoting yourself to a process. I realized a long time ago with prospecting that I could control three things: the quality of my messaging, what I was saying on the phone, what I was saying in email or on LinkedIn, the quantity of outreaches that I make. And as I mentioned, I'll reach out to hundreds of people in an organization to create that groundswell of influence. And then lastly, the consistency of execution over time. Jeb Blunt's got what he calls that golden hour of prospecting. You've got to be intentional about your prospecting. Spend time every day reaching out to and engaging and finding ways to stay top of mind with prospects. And that isn't always the phone or the
No,
email. It could be newsletters. It could be inviting people to things, building community around what you
right.
do.
Right, exactly. And I just think it's very important for people not to give up. Polite yet respectful persistence. Very polite. You can never go wrong by being polite. It works. My method has I've used in Singapore and Australia and Hong Kong. It works across all cultures because people like people that are polite and respectful, and that takes some of the onus off of takes some of the fear out of it. If you can get through to people and start talking to them and they'll listen, and you need to listen. In fact, sometimes when I'm listening, I put my hand over my mouth so I can't talk. I need to listen to what they have to say, and listening is critical,
I
you
like
know.
that. I like that a
Yeah.
lot, Ron. It's all about being intentional and look, even today, I've been in sales for 20 plus years. Even today, there's absolutely sometimes, nerves or doubt right before picking up the phone and making that dial. But if you stay true to yourself, stay true to fundamentals, be polite, seek to serve, and look for ways that you can build a meaningful connection with somebody who is also a human being, your chances of success are higher than you think.
And the fear goes down. The fear of picking up the phone goes down. And it's like you say, you have to do a combination of LinkedIn, emails, phone calls. I even use fax. Fax is not used that much anymore. And what you can do is fax something, have the assistant put it on their chair or on their desk. What's the first thing they have to do before they get going? They have to pick that up and read it. And
Sure.
so by getting people to help you in an organization, not necessarily the decision maker, but the assistants are so valuable. A lot of times they keep the calendar and they can put you on the calendar, but only if you ask.
Yep.
If you don't ask, then you don't receive. So
And most people don't
that
think to do that. I mean,
right,
you've outlined some of these like what I like to call hustle stats, things that people don't think about. They don't necessarily show up in the box score, but they're things that if you do them, they just give you a higher probability of success. You can't neglect any of those key relationships, right? I probably treat the executive assistants with more respect than anybody else because they have the keys to the kingdom.
right. That's exactly it. And that's why I always start with the CEO's assistant and work my way down. And typically,
Brilliant.
if you keep it simple in the beginning, you don't want to ask who's responsible for database management systems. You just say who's responsible for technology. Do you have a CIO or a VP of IS? Now they know the answer to that question, and it's good to ask questions that they know the answers to because that makes them confident in helping you.
Yeah.
So keep it simple in the beginning, and then as you move into the department, you can get more complex. And that's another secret that I find is effective when dealing with people.
I love it. Ron, you're certainly a master of the psychology of selling. So, and for everyone watching, be sure to subscribe to the Siren. We'll put that link in the show notes here. And Ron, thank you so much. This was great. I learned a ton, a lot of key takeaways. And the key thing is too, I always pride myself in being a student of selling. I'm always looking to learn. So just even some of these reminders of things that are super effective. They make us all better. So be mindful of some of these things that you can do to make yourself show up better, be more confident, and your fear of prospecting and cold calling will dissipate.
That's great. Thank you, Carson. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Ron.
Okay. Take care.